parliamentlive.tv 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 parliamentlive.tv. 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 parliamentlive.tv, 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 parliamentlive.tv,
That the Chancellor is making today, which is expected to announce more support for businesses in Tier 2. Now, obviously, this is welcome news, hopefully, but what do you make of the fact that this is happening days after London entered Tier 2, despite the fact that places like Manchester and Bradford has been in the equivalent of Tier 2 for nearly 3 months now?
Thanks so much, Judith, and nice to see you. I mean, I want to pick up on something Tim said. You know, I know we do talk about north-south and the difference, but he makes a really important point where, you know, I want people in London who are struggling to get the same help as people here who are struggling. We're not trying to set people aside. We know this is affecting people everywhere. And we are stronger when, you know, and I'm a patriotic person, I'm proud of our capital city. I want us all to do well, but I just want everywhere to do well at the same time. And sometimes, obviously, it doesn't feel that's the way the country works. But to answer your question, I'm really struggling with this announcement today, if this is what is going to be confirmed. Not because I begrudge people working in pubs or restaurants in London the help. Of course I don't. But why now? You know, why has it taken London to go into Tier 2, for Tier 2 support to become a national issue? I mean, that's the question, isn't it? That everyone has to answer, not just the government, but the country needs to answer that. You know, why do we see some people? Why do we see London's issues much more than we see Liverpool's issues, Greater Manchester's issues? You know, that I think is a really troubling question that this committee needs to talk about as part of this. And actually, wouldn't we have had a better response to this pandemic if at the start we just devolved flexible, significant funding for the support that individuals and businesses were going to need, and that the people on this call and the combined authorities we lead and the councils within them just were given support and backing from the start to help people, rather than an Eat Out to Help Out scheme there and a Kickstart somewhere else. And, you know, that's this culture that we've got, and it doesn't lead us to sort of respond properly as a country. But I honestly was just open-mouthed really when I read the headlines last night that there was going to be a support package. It was billed as being for London and Birmingham, and it was just a case of, hello, we've been under these restrictions for 3 months, and I know you're part of West Yorkshire has as well, and East Lancashire, and that just doesn't seem to have featured at all. Bolton had their pubs closed for 3 weeks with nothing, absolutely nothing, despite the fact that we did raise that on a regular basis. And then this just brings me finally to, you know, in some ways, it makes me ask, what was this week all about then? You know, the slightly brutal nature of the process that we were all in, that Steve was in first, and then Steve was played off against me, and, you know, we were all supposedly in individual negotiations with the government. That's how it was put to us. On Tuesday, in my final discussion with the Prime Minister, I was making the clear pitch to him that we had been in three months of restrictions, and therefore we were in a different position to the Liverpool City region, and different from Lancashire, because parts of East Lancashire have been in restrictions, but not all. And of course, we have more businesses here than they do. And that factor did not weigh at all in the final analysis. They basically said, no, you're going to get the same as the population-based figure for Lancashire and Liverpool. So I just think there are major questions for the government to answer here as to how it's treating places. It feels as though it's dividing and ruling, making one rule for one and one approach for another. And I don't think that's the way you get through a pandemic. In fact, that's the worst way to manage things in a pandemic. And I think there has to be a bit of a reckoning here now. And to be honest, a coming back together. Because, you know, I've not done this for people claim it was politics, people claim posturing. It was none of those things. When Steve and I left Westminster, we were fed up actually of the ways of Westminster. You know, sometimes, as you all know, down there it's politics before people. And what we try and do as mayors is say, no, people in the place first, before politics. And that's what I felt I was doing. You know, a city region, 3 months in restrictions, being asked to go into deeper restrictions. I had to say, this is what I think we need to carry people through this. And obviously that argument wasn't heard, but today it is being heard for other places that have just gone in for Tier 2 restrictions. So unless there is a basic even-handedness in terms of the way you've got a powerful centre that's not treating places equally, and really that is a terrible place to find ourselves in the middle of a pandemic. And I would just say to the government, there has to be a bit of a clear the air here, coming back together, and a kind of a new sort of a reset really between national and local government, and a kind of sense of fairness across the whole of England. Because without it, we really are going into into quite a dark and fairly dangerous place. So, you know, as I say, sorry, Chair, but I just needed to sort of get some of this off my chest, because I say I don't begrudge anybody in Tier 2 restrictions, but why wasn't that a major factor that weighted in our favour when we were in those final discussions with the government on Tuesday? And why couldn't they then have closed a £5 million gap between what I had come down to be asking for and what they said they were offering? but as we now know, not offering because it was any more than anywhere else had got. And I just think, this all now has to be sort of the matter of a proper public debate and a kind of reset moment for the governance of England.
Thank you for that. Paul Howell, please.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's just moving the discussion into a slightly different place. It's been very, very clear over the last week, the profile of, yourselves in terms of having the discussions. And, when it comes to levelling up, I mean, I look at yourself, Andy, and I look at you as being in the south somewhere. I look after Sedgefield, and I've got this split that goes between having a mayor and not having a mayor. And that's really where the question's coming from, in the sense that, you guys are shouting for your regional areas, but obviously, if I take mine, Durham County hasn't got a mayor. So how do we make sure that when we talk about levelling up, we talk about the ability of people like yourselves to shout, what about the ones that's not quite there yet in terms of structure? I know there's things moving in the direction, but I'd be interested how do we make sure that, you might not be listened to, but what about the next level that's not even into the Metro Mayor area? Jamie, you put your hand up. Do you want to start there?
If Jamie could answer that. And then...
please. Yeah, nice to meet you, Paul. Very much looking forward to working with you on this, actually. We've not had a chance to catch up yet. So the wider Northeast, we are at a place where we're working together. So I work very closely with your councillors, your council leader, Simon Hennick. And as the Northeast, we've been working together closely as an LA7, all of the 7 local authorities. And the local authorities now, part of the world, are very large. There might not be very many of them. But not only that, we've been working with the CBI, we've been working with the universities, we've been working with the Chamber of Commerce, we've been working with the trade unions, we've been working with even the religious organisations. We might need the odd prayer at the moment. So that, I think, is very much the way it works. Now, I can't speak for areas of the country outside of the Northeast, but the Northeast, it comes back to that, what is a functional economic area? Now, everywhere has points at the edge of the boundary. At the moment, I represent Berwick, and it's fair to say that Berwick is not an economic satellite of Newcastle. But again, you've got to eventually draw a line somewhere. And it does benefit significantly from being part of a combined authority, because in Sedgefield, whether it's Trindam, whether it's Aycliffe, all of these places, they are still people working in those places who live on Tyneside, the people, the big businesses down your way, likewise that level of commuting is going on. So it is that functional economic area that makes a big difference. And particularly when it comes to things like inter-regional transport, which can't be done on, for example, a County Durham area on its own, because the majority of people in Durham move across the border, just as I live in Newcastle, my wife works in Gateshead, so she crosses the border every day. And hopefully we won't see a situation where there is a hard border at the edge of the region I represent with Scotland. I seriously hope we don't get to that place. But it is that ability to have someone who knows the area and is able to convene. And just to build on this point about Metro Mayors, it's worth noting, Andy was talking about Westminster politics there, of which I have no direct experience. But I remember him saying the 2070 Commission speech in Manchester about how he's found politics very, very different since he's left Parliament. And it's noticeable that my job isn't to stand across the dispatch box and face a shadow mayor every week and try and win a battle of headlines. My job is to bring people together. It's a cross-party combined authority. And we've never yet fallen out about anything. We have all of the sectors working together because our objective is how do we do our best for our region. And when it comes to levelling up, actually I have an issue with the phrase levelling up. It kind of implies that that's the average and we've somehow got to get towards that ceiling. I don't want it to be a ceiling, I want us to move beyond it. I just want to create wealth for our entire region. That's why I think this system works.
Thank you for that. Now, I'm conscious of time, so we're going to need to try to pick up the pace a little bit. We're going to move. This was important because one of the areas of interest that we have is whether combined authorities, for example, are delivery arms of government or actually regional government in and of their own right, where decisions are made. And in the context of levelling up, I think that's important. So we'll just move on now to some of the questions around combined authority performance. We know that the Prime Minister has said that where there are combined authorities, that this is likely to be the vehicle where levelling up funding whatever that is going to be, will be delivered. But obviously not every area in the country has a combined authority, so we've already spoken to local enterprise partnerships and councils as well. One interesting question that comes up is whether combined authorities actually have the capacity to deliver, for example, big infrastructure projects or big services, and whether you've got the powers and resources to do that or not. So I just wonder if we could go round the table and pull out some examples of something that has been delivered through the combined authority under your leaderships, which wouldn't have been delivered without you having been there in the first place, and whether you think you've got the capacity to deliver big infrastructure projects or not. And I'm going to go in the reverse order from people that have spoken already. So I'll come to Tim Bowles first, please.
Chair, thank you very much. Bearing in mind we get involved in lots of things from major infrastructure projects which take ages to deliver. I'm going to pick one out there in major infrastructure, but I'm then going to very, very quickly touch on things like skills, because that's really the thing that can make differences in short terms. So if you take our Metro West Suburban Rail project, we are moving that forward at a pace that would not have been happening if we as the combined authority hadn't brought both the councils, Network Rail and others together, and also then get the backing of DfT to find the new money that's allowing that to be delivered. Now clearly we are not going to have people with orange jackets on with combined authority on the back in the same way that you wouldn't with a council on the back of it. But what we're able to do is challenge those delivery arms about how we improve, speed up and deliver more effectively. Project Speed is actually helping us do that. And we are re-challenging aspects around Metro West delivery. So we can do it on the infrastructure side. When we look at the skills side, again, Jamie's touched on convening, it's bringing people together. We have delivered enterprise advisors into every school across the west of England, now including SEND schools, by working with the Careers and Enterprise Company, with our schools, with our colleges, with our councils to deliver in those spaces. Those are just two very quick examples of how you can really make a difference in long-term projects, but also make a really rapid intervention into others. So yes, it does need to be through us as the convening power, but it's not about us being a delivery arm. That's where you use the right people to deliver, and that could be whether it's our councils, other infrastructure providers, whoever they may be.
Thank you for that. I'll just come back a little on some of that, but just to say, could you pull your mic forward, because we were losing your voice a little bit there just towards the end. So just to test some of the points you make there. So you say that the transport project Metro West was delivered quicker because of the combined authority. How quicker has that been? So what were the dates for delivery before the combined authority, and how have those been shortened, and to what years under the combined authority?
Okay, so, and I don't know if that's any better in terms of the microphone. I have just twiddled a little bit, Chair. I don't know if that helps at all. Happily share you some more detail in that, and I know particularly from your constituency that's of interest. And please excuse the fact I haven't got my programme of delivery dates in front of me. COVID has had an impact.
I'm only interrupting because if you haven't got the data, we'll have to move on. But and then on the skills point and the delivery of skills and apprenticeships, again, just the same question, because that would have been delivered before by the councils, presumably. So what added value has the combined authority added compared to what the councils would have delivered beforehand?
Well, firstly, we're able to do it now across a regional basis. So we're able to work with our businesses, understand what those businesses need and address that. So it's not being done just around a simple council boundary. But the point I was making is we have brought in other partners who are owning some of that investment. So part of the challenge that we have as combined authorities is not simply the fact that we need devolved financial settlements to us, but a lot of those things that we're involved in, there are other bodies that have got public finance. So whether that's, we've talked about infrastructure, but in this instance, it could be other finance bodies. So we've brought those together and we're delivering that at scale and at pace across the region in a way that an individual council, I don't believe, would have been able to.
Okay, thank you. And when we come back to you later, Tim, I'm just being asked if you could maybe hold the mic up a bit more. That would be great, but we'll come back to you later. So Steve, same question to you. At the Liverpool City Region Combined Authority, what added value have you been able to offer kind of existing tiers of city government, the LEPs and those types of bodies?
How long have you got? Genuinely, I could fill the rest of this time telling you the sort of things that we've done to speed things up. For instance, we're now working with Network Rail on a pilot scheme so that we can accelerate project delivery, and that's going to happen in a place called Kirby that I was born and raised up in, and that means that it will be another new rail station from sort of off the drawing board to delivery in about 2 years. So that's really accelerating the timescale. That sounds like a long time to me, but these schemes sometimes take up to 15 years, and that's what we're seeing in other things. We've had a station in Muggle North. We brought forward the purchase of our own trains, so brand new rolling stock for the city region worth £500 million, and they'll be the most sophisticated trains with level access for people with disabilities. So we've done lots and lots of stuff on transport infrastructure. If we move on to housing, we've brought forward brownfield sites because we've worked with Homes England, who are now co-located in our building. So we can actually go down and speak to human beings rather than, having to send emails. That has accelerated delivery from housing projects, including West Bank, which is in the Wirral, literally over the water from where my office is, and schemes there. Schemes across the other districts. We're looking at major infrastructure projects around bringing forward our, what we're calling Building Back Better recovery plan, working with government to get support for those projects. Again, they've seen that we can get a bigger bang for our buck, and that's why they have confidence that we can deliver these things. On skills, our adult education budget, we are getting better results than ever before in regard to the limited funding pot, in all honesty, £50 million that we get from central government, but we're getting more people more job ready and with the right skills for the jobs of the future. We're also planning on what are the jobs of the future, what do we need strategically within the city region. So again, we've got a future skills plan, and we're starting to tailor what the outputs are in our colleges and in our training providers, so that we can get the right people with the right skills for the jobs that we're going to invest in, for the types of projects that we know will get funding from government. So it's an alignment of all of those strategic priorities that's really starting to pay dividends. But Tim quite rightly said, these are strategic projects. These are not a couple of days or months in the making. These take a long time. If you have a look at what we do in another 2 or 3 years, 4 years time, I'm absolutely certain that this won't be an experiment. This will be something that everybody in the country recognises is the only way in which you can genuinely get projects that are speeded up, delivery that's accelerated, and it's tailored to the needs of what needs to happen in the local area, and not just because Westminster wants to throw around a few crumbs off the table.
Thanks for that, Steve. And Jamie, from your perspective, you talked about limited resources earlier, for example. Do you feel you have the resources you need to deliver the kind of pledges you made to your electorate when you ran to be the regional mayor?
Thank you. Very good question, that about resources. Levelling up is often cast as, money coming from central government to the regions. I'm a firm believer in redistribution, particularly through taxation. But I want us to get to the point where we're able to generate wealth and create wealth in our own region and keep wealth in our own region and distribute it by paying taxes. So I think we should have a regional wealth fund. I think we should have the powers to borrow at base rate. If we can do that, I know, because we've been looking into it in great detail, we've got some detailed work that I've been speaking to people who manage funds. A £500 million investment fund would allow us to support all of the businesses. The North East particularly struggles by not having the levels of private equity available that you get in somewhere like London. And that would allow us not only to create jobs, not only to shape the economy for a green recovery, but it would also give us a significant level of financial independence, because these decisions will be made by people democratically elected in their areas with a mandate to do that. If we look at land value capture, we're talking there about infrastructure. At the moment, we've got the Northumberland line, which has been going for about 15 years. If that gets put in, the land around it is going to shoot up by hundreds of millions of pounds. The entire scheme cost 182 million. If we could put a charge on that wealth that we have created as the public purse, putting that in, we could fund it up front, and we could have all the schemes that are viable and just get cracking on them. That would be fantastic. And the ability to move things across budgets. So yes, there's the Green Book, but we all know that, for example, obesity, we've kind of hit the limit of what you can do with sugar taxes. The best thing you can do for obesity is have a better public transport system that's affordable and gets people everywhere, so they walk a bit and cycle a bit as well as getting on the bus. But there's no mechanism to get the savings, the long-term savings in terms of health, all detailed in the Marmot report and others, to make the case for that. So if we were to have them, that goes to your question of should we be delivery arm of government, or should we be looking for serious regional devolution? And I say serious regional devolution because that will allow us to get much better results.
Thank you for that. And lastly, Andy, you've probably got the biggest set of devolved powers and services and one of the largest regions under your metro mayoralty. Are you content with what you have and your ability to deliver, or do you think you need more?
No, I do think we need more, Chair. You won't be surprised to hear me say that. But I think it's that more true devolution, where we don't have to go on bended knee. I mean, that's the point I was making at the start. Just allow us to take responsibility and move towards fiscal devolution. That should be the journey that we're on. And to Mr. Howell's question, I want what we've got for everywhere. You know, I think this, everywhere's on a journey here, but let's move to a different country where power is more distributed. And as Steve was saying, I think, and Jamie, you can get a better, what we've all noticed is you can get a healthier politics where it's about place rather than party, because you're starting with something that everyone agrees with rather than something that's kind of divisive. So, there's so much the country could benefit from properly embracing devolution as to the sort of, we've got a half-hearted thing at the moment. We've got new structures, but the old politics being used with these new structures. And we now need to move to the next phase of this. And Rome wasn't built in a day, but we're getting there. In terms of your examples, Chair, let me give you two quick ones. On infrastructure, we prioritised cycling and walking early on through our inspirational cycling and walking commissioner, Chris Boardman. So we've developed the B network, which is the country's largest cycling and walking infrastructure. And you asked about added value, so let me tell you directly what the added value is from a combined authority. We've created single standards for that segregated infrastructure. So rather than councils all having their own sort of cycling standards, what you start to get then is that consistency across a wide geography, which I think is really important. So we're taking that further forward now. We're looking at minimum taxi licensing standards across Greater Manchester. We think a world city of our status, people will expect to come out of Manchester Airport and see a single livery on all of our taxis across our 10 boroughs. That, I think, is how England can benefit from this movement towards devolved standards, because it will allow English cities outside of London to start to sort of punch their weight a little more, if you like. And we want, ultimately, to take this thinking towards a London-style public transport system that's integrated and affordable and consistent, in terms of delivery of the buses, etc. So that's an infrastructure example. Just quickly give you a people example, where you say we've made a difference. I would say it's homelessness for us, where there was a big commitment on rough sleeping, and obviously it's a tough one. And without going into huge detail, Chair, what we've managed to do is just sort of galvanise everybody, the 10 councils, the NHS, Greater Manchester Police, but actually mobilise civil society. And this is the thing I think you need to sort of think about as a committee about combined authorities and elected mayors. It's the soft power of the role, the convening power. You can be so much more than the budgets you get from Whitehall, and you can actually pull people to the table. I had the captain of Manchester City Football Club, who came and backed what we were calling Bed Every Night, which became a Greater Manchester-wide campaign. And before the lockdown, we'd reduced rough sleeping by over half in Greater Manchester. So, that I think is the power of what you can unlock here. And it's just a better way of people connecting with politics and with issues than it always being done through the prism of Westminster debate. So those would be my two examples, and I would certainly say in both cases there's been added value. And lastly, I think just a point before I forget it, Steve touched on it. We've got a zero carbon target of 2038. I think Liverpool are looking at one similar. I know Bristol and West Country have got a really ambitious one. Jamie too. If you free us up to go more quickly at those national ambitions, it will help UK PLC hit 2050. So if you've got this thing where cities are freed up to become the early adopters, the first movers, it's going to help everybody, everywhere eventually, because you pioneer the new technologies, you train the new workforce, it brings on the future more quickly when you've got cities pushing at the boundaries. And England doesn't have that outside of London at the moment. And that's why we could help the country as a whole if you free up the power of the cities that are represented on this call.
Thank you for that. I'm now going to move on to Charlotte Nichols, please. Charlotte, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. And to start, sort of declaration of interest of sorts, which is to put on record my thanks to Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham for the work they've been doing with regards to financial support for Tier 3. My constituency is nestled in between their respective city regions, and our fate in Warrington is obviously very closely tied to the fates of theirs, not least because we're meeting the Department of Health today with the expectation that we'll be expected to join them in Tier 3. But my question is this: a key challenge to levelling up is knowing where the gaps exist and where regional growth needs to be supported. Is the lack of regional economic growth data a fundamental challenge to the delivery of levelling up agenda? And what targets have you set yourselves and how do you measure these? So I will start just because of where you are on my screen with Tim Bowles, if that's okay.
Thank you, Charlotte. And Chair, I've taken my headset off, so I hope my audio is a little better. I can see you nodding. Thank you. So Charlotte, thank you very much. That was a really good question. We have an incredible amount of economic information and evidence behind how we are planning everything. But I absolutely agree that COVID and other challenges will start to affect that. So one of the problems we have as a region is ONS data and government data doesn't recognise the geographies that each of us as regional mayors represent. So we need to be able to get that information through ONS and other government-related bodies that represent and relate to who we all are now as those functional economic areas that others have mentioned. So there does need to be a change in that. There also needs, as far as I'm concerned, also a big conversation about how we're able to bring other data sources together. So we've been doing work with mobile phone providers, for instance, around being able to use the future mobility zones to use live anonymous data from other sources. So we do need to be able to unlock the way government looks at its data, the times in which it releases it, because there are lags in that data to come to us. So how do we start getting real live, almost dashboard information from those respective areas? We do it on a local and regional level with our partners, but an awful lot of that information, because it is managed and held centrally in Whitehall, needs unlocking to us. That will help us be both far more reactive but able to plan even better for the future. Hope that gives you some thoughts.
Thank you for that. Andy Burnham?
Thanks very much, Charlotte, and thanks for what you said at the beginning. And we certainly always, Steve and I do, it's not contested territory, by the way, Warrington. You know, we both feel protectiveness towards Warrington. I think you are knitted into both of our city regions, as you said, and we would want you obviously to get all of the support that we're trying to get as part of this. I think you're absolutely right about data. The question is, what do we measure, I guess, and what is meaningful in terms of levelling up to the public is, you know, because sometimes the dry data about the economy doesn't capture where people are. One thing that I would just recommend to the committee that you might want to think about, because I was thinking of my own, I tried to create some new metrics when I became mayor, because I wanted to kind of make sure that we were kind of really making a difference for people. And one that I had a big feeling when I became there that we needed to focus on young people. Devolution needed to be about young people. I always felt in Westminster that it was, old people that got the promises at elections and young people were the target for cuts, and I kind of felt devolution had to sort of do the opposite. And in particular, I wanted this to be a sense that was a great place to grow up. So I asked the team to develop a survey about hope for the future. And we do that now, a life readiness survey across all of our city region, where we ask year 10s, I think, whether or not they have hope for the future. And it's the kind of statistic that national government never collects, but I think this is the thing about devolution. It can be about people, not statistics. I always kind of, when I was health secretary, I always used to say, in that job I could see numbers, not names, but in this job I can see names, not numbers. And I think, if you start to think in that way, you can sort of rethink what we capture and what we get. I mean, the truth of the matter is, it's a hard read sometimes, because in places, sort of 2/3 to 3/4 of young people say they have hope, but obviously a third say they don't. And I think that changing that is what will make levelling up meaningful in my mind. So, I think part of this should be about redefining what we capture and how we make it meaningful. And Chair, I've got to probably go before too long. So shall I make this my last contribution without wanting to hold the floor too long? But,
I'm calling Mark Pawsey after Charlotte, and he just has a small question on industrial strategy. So if we can just keep you.
I'll leave it there then. I'll come back in one more time. I don't want to sort of take too.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Time. But thanks, Charlotte. And we will be supporting Warrington. You'll be with us in the challenges that lie ahead.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And I think the point that you made about hope is really important, because I think that's one of the biggest issues with this kind of period of uncertainty that everyone's in at the moment. If I could come to Jamie Driscoll next.
Thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, they're exactly the right question. Where are the gaps? Data is very good at measuring the what, it's not very good at measuring the why. And I think that's, along with data, needs a strong principle of co-design, which is what we're building into everything. In terms of, we're a very new combined authority, but we have launched a project with the National Innovation Centre for Data to get some proper data analysis done. So that's not just the gathering of the statistics, but then looking through the whys, getting deeply involved. So we have our Citizens Assembly on Climate Change to find out what is it that people might be able to take people with us. Our Truth Poverty Commission, looking at the real reasons that it's affecting people, rather than necessarily doing things to people, doing things with people. You get better results. And so, there's any number of examples I can give, but one very short one. We have an education challenge that we've put to government. We wanted to know why it was there was a problem with teacher recruitment and retention, and not just the levels of it. So the best thing to do is to actually talk to them. And so, on the housing, I know the names of all of the housing and work with all of the housing leaders in all of the local authorities. We have a similar situation with education and all the rest of it. And it's that pulling together that gives you not just the raw data, but the fingertip feel of why, that lets you really tailor the interventions that I think you can get with devolution.
Thank you for that. And finally, Steve Rotherham.
Thanks, Charlotte, and I think you're doing a great job in the buffer zone now, as you'll be called, between me and Burnham. I'm a bit more positive, in all honesty, about the power of data to actually influence policy direction. And I sat on an expert economic panel just a week or so ago with people like Mariana Mazzucato, who I very much enjoy and support, and her book, The Entrepreneurial State, I'd say is something that everybody who is involved in this should take very seriously. But look, understanding the differences that we're making in our area has to be measured, and our aim is to create a globally competitive, environmentally sustainable and an inclusive economy. So it is important that we monitor those indicators so that we can identify the progress, and that we get away from just the traditional GVA and jobs measures. So we are in the process of developing a dashboard of indicators, as Andy was talking about, to capture the relevant economic, environmental and social measures, because we have a target of being net zero carbon by 2040, but we'll need some new measures to be able to determine that we are in the right space along that journey. We want to do more things about Black Lives Matters. We will need some new matrix to be able to measure how we're doing that. And so alongside the national stuff, we want to understand the difference that we're making locally, and that has to be about those performance indicators, so that people have confidence that not only are we spending the money correctly in line with our assurance framework, but also that it is alongside the priorities for our individual area, and that will be different, I would have thought, than other areas in the country where we have a very determined focus on things like, for instance, community wealth building and genuine inclusive growth, about trying to smash some of those glass ceilings and getting, for instance, young girls involved in data programming, about trying to get underrepresented groups into the jobs of the future. We want to create those role models, but we want to change the way our economy functions. And the way you do that, of course, is by having confidence in the economic data. And that's why, it's so important to us that alongside government, we can develop this suite of economic indicators so that we can be measured.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Mark Pawsey, please.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'm pleased that we've got on to some of the very positive things that combined authorities are able to do. And it was great to hear Steve and Andy reeling off many of the achievements that their combined authorities have done. And to hear from Jamie that he wants his combined authority to generate and keep wealth. And I think it is important to remember that it's not the combined authorities that will generate and keep that wealth, it's the businesses that are within it that will generate and keep wealth. And I'm interested in how we attract those businesses into the areas where we need them. And we are the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Select Committee, and we're looking at the role of the industrial strategy. And if the industrial strategy remained as just one document that was a nice glossy brochure that was produced here in Westminster and then circulated round, that would be it. But it isn't. It moves on to that because there is a requirement to produce local industrial strategies. And this is why I'm very keen to hear from Andy, because Manchester was one of the trailblazers. You were one of the first combined authorities to generate these documents. I just want to understand about that process and how the principles that may be contained in the national industrial strategy assisted you in developing that, and how it has helped you attract business to your area. Then I would like to hear from each of the other combined authorities where they've got to with theirs. But I know, Andy, yours has been in existence for some time. So how is it helping?
Thank you very much, Mark. It's a really important question, and we enthusiastically embraced the idea of local industrial strategies when the previous Prime Minister first brought it forward. We think it's absolutely the way to go. The city regions on this call have got different industrial strengths, but actually the governance of the country has never fully recognised that. It's not kind of, it didn't in the. Not to make it too political, but in the past when industry was changing in the 80s, if it had helped rethink how industry needed to change, it would have been a better way of approaching it rather than jumping more towards the City of London and a service economy. It would have been a local industrial strategy would have been exactly what was needed at that particular moment in time. But as I say, we've embraced it, and the Greater Manchester economy is different from the Liverpool City region economy. And what we did was this is the power of devolution, Mark. We co-wrote it, basically. So it was a sort of amazing exercise of the University of Manchester and the other universities being very much in it, but so are businesses big and small. And a lot of work went into this across the city region, and everyone felt a real ownership of it. And it identified the big sectors that we wanted to sort of promote: digital, health, advanced manufacturing materials, zero carbon. It was a really good exercise. The problem is, and this is to get to an issue that's true of all governments, including the one that I was in, suddenly they went out of fashion. So having done all of that work, the phrase local industrial strategy was all of a sudden off the agenda and it couldn't be used anymore because it was the previous government's issue, not the current one.
But the local industrial strategy is yours. It's not the government's. It's your combined authorities document, and that's presumably the template that you are using to attract businesses to your area, recognising that what you've got is different from other parts of the country.
You're half right. It was co-signed between ourselves and the government. It was a joint document, actually. So the former business secretary, Greg Clark, came here. We signed it together. And it was very much meant to be a partnership because obviously we cannot leave all of the funding to achieve all of the ambitions within it.
Sure, but presumably you bought into it. Whilst the government needed sign-off, I can't imagine there was stuff in there you didn't agree with, or was there?
No. Honestly, we wholeheartedly bought into it. It was a really great document, and it was a great exercise in working together with central government. The problem is there's not been the follow-through now to make the things within it a reality. And I think that's a case of sort of people being marched up to the top of the hill and then the delivery doesn't come. And I think this is something that the committee might want to think about.
Andy, to what extent can you control the delivery with the funding you have? Are you saying that you haven't got the funding to do what the aspirations that are set out in that?
No, absolutely. No, we are implementing the industrial strategy, Mark. So yeah, you were asking a fair question. So I'll give you a couple of examples. GCHQ have relocated their innovation hub to city centre Manchester, which we're very proud of. So we have a cyber foundry that we've created now to create a centre of excellence in cyber skills, and that was very much part of the digital part of our industrial strategy. With regard to the zero carbon ambition, we are now looking at a retrofitting scheme for properties across the city region, all the skills that come with that. We've invested in a creative digital skills enterprise called the School of Digital Arts, SODA, with Manchester Metropolitan University. So now we are putting it into place. I'm just trying to say to you that it would have so much more oomph behind it if all of the funding was coming in from central government. And I think there is an important point here, Mark, and this is true of governments of all colours, by the way, including the one that I was in. There are things that are in fashion in Westminster, then they go quickly out of fashion because something else, a new slogan has emerged. And I think if you're to run a combined authority, you kind of want the long-term position to be set so that you can deliver. And that, I think, requires a different relationship between ourselves and central government. If it's the sort of thing about the goldfish mentality of Westminster constantly jumping onto a new thing, a new slogan, a new phrase, it really doesn't work for us.
Okay, thank you. Andy, I know you need to get off, so I'm wondering if we can ask the other Metro mayors where they are with their...
Can I just, before I do, say thank you, Mark, just to say thank you to all. I apologise that I've got to go, Chair, but thank you for the opportunity to speak to everyone today. And can I just say, Chair, I'm just so glad to see you in your position, and glad that your association with my failed leadership bid has not damaged your parliamentary career, which I'm sure will continue to be stellar. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks
Andy.
for your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Back to Mark.
Yeah, so Steve, where have you developed a local industrial strategy? Where are you with that at the minute?
Thanks, Mark. Again, just picking up on the point that you were speaking to Andy about, we have, but it is also in concert with central government, and surely that's the right thing to do, because you have a national industrial strategy. It would be bizarre, wouldn't it, if then local industrial strategies had no reference to that and just went off and did things that are completely at odds with central government. So we are in the latter stages of agreeing our lists with government, and I think the longer term strategic opportunities that we've put in that document will be even more relevant now in light of COVID. And of course, what we've done is we've included lots of that work in our post-COVID recovery plan that we're also co-producing with central government. And that's around things like, health innovation, industrial digitalisation, social innovation, and of course, the global power of culture. We may not be the European capital of culture anymore, but I'd say we're still the cultural capital in the UK, and our figures attest to that. But the list is critical for that long-term recovery. We need sustainable long-term funding from government, and that's what we're trying to get, a single pot. We need to protect and safeguard jobs, and that's what we're doing at the moment. But actually, in the long term, we need to identify the direction of travel that we need to start on to get to where we want, and that is about changing a lot of the things in our city region that we've been overly reliant on, and looking towards the fourth industrial revolution, the green industrial revolution, the new technologies, things that we have an international and global competitive advantage on, and really trying to push them forward. So life sciences for us, pharma, medtech, lots of stuff around modern methods of construction, green recovery stuff, all within the list. But if I can just tease just two of those out as well, on the sort of the future of the planet, we're hoping to enter into an agreement with Unilever, and they want to build a national packaging innovation centre in Port Sunlight on the Wirral. And this might be able to change the way in which we use plastics and replace plastics in the future, which will have global significance. And we want, along with governments, to invest in that. And then we need to change our energy mix. And we've got the River Mersey, as you'll know. It does have the highest, well, the second highest ebb and flow. So the tidal range is massive. We can harness that for clean, green, renewable, predictable energy for 1 million homes and 120 years. And what we need to do is to get the government to change the way it thinks about investing in business and future opportunities, and getting away from the green book methodology of 35 years and it's just on one factor. We need to spread that out, because it is the businesses that will benefit, because we will develop the technology, modularize it, and then potentially export it to the rest of the world. And that can only happen in working in partnership with central government.
Okay, and so, Steve, you've told us about some projects. Has the realisation of those been assisted by the national strategy, the national industrial strategy, and your local strategy sitting alongside it? Or frankly, would they have happened anyway?
No, it wouldn't have happened in isolation, and it dovetails exactly with what you're indicating there. It is about trying to see what are the bits that we're really good at locally that national government, if you like, want to buy. So we're saying, if you're after buying something, have a look at what we've got to offer government. Okay,
and Tim, where's your local industrial strategy?
I'm delighted to say it was published last year. So I would be happy to get you a copy. So we did work at very, very serious pace, and we were able to get it published just before the last general election. So very pleased about that. As you've heard from Steve and from Andy, it was co-produced with government having an input and effectively going through it as well, because Steve's right. You have to make sure it matches what the National Industrial Strategy was doing. Ours was built with our LEP, with all of our partners in the region, including a great deal of consultation with lots of other groups, not just with our councils, but lots of other groups across the region. Now, I'm really pleased that we've raised that question today, because I think in terms of COVID, there will need to be a resetting of that. And so, to be very clear, we are already working on that, and our LEP are taking that challenge up to be able to address how we need to review our local industrial strategy. But it is the pillar around which we have been building and will continue to build the strengths in our region. And I think we've all touched on, it allows us to focus on our real strengths and make those really strong cases to government, but also to business nationally and internationally, about us being the right place to invest for our strengths. We've got lots of examples of that, and I'm really pleased our inward investment team are still receiving really positive and good inquiries about businesses who are already, in spite of COVID, looking to locate and set up operations here.
Okay, and Tim, would you say that the fact that you've got that strategy in place has helped you in that? Are there investments that you can point to that you might not have got without that alignment with the government's industrial strategy and the document that you've prepared?
Okay, so ours was published, as I say, towards the end of last year. What we were very clear in there is about where our strengths lie, and when I look at the investment that we're receiving into the region around research, development, tech and innovation, they fit into those pillars. But may I also put quickly into this mix the way in which we use our local industrial strategy then to target what our investments are as a combined authority, in terms of how we're supporting those things, because it's got a huge evidence base behind it. And that's always the important thing for when you're looking at investments, whether it's from the combined authority, from business or government, that you've got the evidence to back up those business cases and why we're looking for things. And I'd like to just very quickly, if I may, also highlight how for us, that research and development is the key. We work incredibly closely with our universities and those other startups. And I'm really interested because I think that government are looking almost at that next generation of industrial strategy that's going to perhaps be based heavily around science, technology and innovation. And each of us as regions will have our specialities and those things that we excel in. And I think it's another great opportunity for us as mayors and regions to really build on those strengths. I think the Chair said a little earlier about combined authorities almost being arms of government. I don't think any of us would say that literally, but it's our ability to work with government, work irrespective of where we are or what parties are, working with government to show how we as regions can develop not just our regional economy for the benefit of everybody, but how we deliver for the country as well in that. Ours is very much a piece that we're looking in terms of that future. So I welcome that part. We are all really keen on seeing that element about green technology. So we've invested in the new Institute for Advanced Automotive Propulsion Systems. We're investing in DETI, the Digital Engineering Technology Innovation Centre. Our primes like Airbus, GKN are all brought into this, and it allows us to funnel and if you like, focus our investments on those new technologies that are going to really provide those strengths and make sure we continue at the forefront as an economy.
Okay, thank you, Tim. And Jamie, because we're short of time, but could you just bring us an update with your local industrial strategy?
Yeah, certainly, Mark. It's been developed by the LEP and not by the North of Tyne Combined Authority. So it's not our, my organisation that I lead industrial strategy. It's covering the wider northeast. It's at a place where it's not been officially agreed yet. My conversations with the outgoing LEP chair has recently stepped down in the last few weeks and been replaced after serving for a long time, was that it was sent backwards and forwards to Whitehall a couple of times.
And can I ask you, are you missing out because you haven't got one?
I'm not sure there's a control to that experiment. What I do know is that we've been able to secure investment, brought 1,000 jobs here. We're very sure.
Would you have done better if this had all been tied up and put to bed?
The best way to answer that is to say that the biggest opportunity for growth for the north of Tyne is with clean energy and offshore wind. There's a couple of things that are massive barriers to that. One, quite literally, is a set of cables that go across the Tyne that carry the national grid. They need to be buried under the Tyne. We can produce that entire project locally on the banks of the Tyne if the funding's available. That is a barrier to export. And when it comes to the sector deal with offshore wind, local content, and this is very BEIS relevant, I've spoken to Alok Sharma and others about this, local content requires the deal requires that 60% is local content. That's not being hit, it's not being monitored. At the moment, we're seeing very large projects go abroad to the Gulf, to the Far East, where they could be, and these are for things that get stationed in UK territorial waters. These are things that could generate massive amounts of jobs and wealth here, as well as the clean energy. So these are the sort of things that I think our industrial strategy, local industrial strategy, wouldn't have the power to do anyway. So I think there is
So you're telling us the limitations. Jamie, I think we do need to move on. I'm being the glare from the chairman.
a polite glare. Jamie, just very quickly, you said the local enterprise partnerships, local industrial strategy hasn't been signed off. We'd been told previously by the chair of the LET networks that all of England's 38 local industrial strategies had been signed off. So do you know whether it has or it hasn't been signed off for your region?
Well, that would be a question to check up. Last conversation I had, it wasn't, and I've just had a look on the internet.
Okay, thank you for that. Paul Howell, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Turning the conversation round a little bit to come from the other angle. We've talked about the linkage of maize to government. What about maize to your populations? And just to come back on a couple of issues while you think about that particular subject. Andy mentioned earlier about cross-country and being full for the UK. Yeah, I chair a APPG on left behind communities, and I get that it's all the UK that we need to look at, not just spots on it. And in terms of working cross-party, I don't think there's a better example than what Ben Houchin had to do for the Tees Valley with 5 Labour councils initially. So, yeah, I get the cross-party working. And Jamie, delighted to meet you at some time and really have a good conversation. So look forward to that. But coming back to the question, which is about you guys and your communities, I know from where I sit in the Tees Valley that Ben Houchin has a good profile locally. I've seen a huge amount, obviously, of Andy Burnham on the news lately. I don't have a perspective in terms of your local profiles in your local areas. And more importantly, coming out of business, how would I know whether I'm dealing with you, whether I'm dealing with the LEP, whether I'm dealing with the local authority? How do you get that clarity of message to business in terms of driving economic growth? Maybe start with Steve.
Yeah, that was one of the first questions actually that I tackled when I was elected, and you're absolutely right. I think the premise of the question is predicated on the fact that it's a very, very cluttered landscape if you're a business. Certainly if you're an inward investor, to go into an area, who do you go to, what organisations do you first approach? And so we looked at something called One Front Door, which was the opportunity to pull the 6 districts, but all of the business support agencies all together. And we've done that. Believe me, it's not an easy task, but we've done it. And it's now called a growth platform. And so all inquiries, FDI, whatever it might be, go through One Front Door, go through the growth platform. And what we do now, we were accused once of missing out on an investment opportunity because we had 2 or 3 of our local authorities basically competing against each other for that investment opportunity, instead of looking at what was the best strategic fit for the opportunity. And that's all gone now. When we have an inquiry that comes into us, we look at where can we best fit this particular inquiry into the geography of the Liverpool City region, and then gather around with business support so that we can ensure that we are successful and it's demonstrably working.
Thanks for that, Steve. I'll come to the other guys as well. And obviously, your start point was particularly poor. And not you, everybody. All the metro mayors had very low election turnouts. So actually, you're gathering your profile and moving it on. Anyway, Tim, do you want to just give your perspective on that?
Yes, of course, and thanks for that. And I think Steve's touched on business and investors really understand the role of Metro Met. It is around economic development and attracting investment. So they really understand and get it. And again, like Steve was talking about there, our Invest Bristol and Bath team is that front door where those inquiries come in. And what that team do is then try to look at what is the best solution across the region. And bear in mind that it's not just about investment into a site, it's about investments in jobs and that wealth that it creates. Now that crosses all of your borders. That's why we're a functional economic market area and in terms of how we move. So business absolutely get it, and that works effectively. Steve's point about One Front Door is a good one. I also talk a great deal about there being no wrong door. For me, the economics of our region will still expand if somebody goes and approaches any of our individual councils, because then we'll still all work together. So I very much see it as a no wrong door aspect, but we are landing investment, as I say, in terms of new investment, growth, attracting businesses relocating here and expanding. The point around our electorate is a very good one, because what we all need to be able to do is that ability, by working with government as well, to explain what we can do as mayors to make differences to people's lives. So I know I have made differences to thousands and thousands of people's lives across the region, and we're doing that in lots of ways. We're working with every school in the region. We're working about reskilling existing workforces. We work with every stakeholder in that space. So thousands and thousands of people are already directly benefiting from what we do. We all need to up that in terms of what we're showing and delivering and communicating. And often it's not just about communications, it's about individuals comprehending what it is that we're doing as well. So of course we've all got to keep working at doing that, but I'm really, really positive about what we've seen as a result of having a Metro Mayor and what we've driven in that economic growth, new jobs, new business, new investment, and it's then converting that and translating it so people really understand what we're delivering.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sorry, yeah, I endorse that, Tim, in terms of a lot of things. And I actually touch it and feel it and see it in the Tees Valley, where I can see that it's a clear thing that business would see Ben Houchin and his team as being the people that drive that. I'll obviously go back at some point to the same conversation I had before earlier in terms of the ones outside of that, like Durham and places, obviously sit with, as to how that clarity gets in things. But do you want to just finish this conversation off, Jeremy, just as to where you are on things?
Yes, yeah, thanks very much, Paul. Just to answer the previous question, I've had confirmation industrial strategy has not been signed off by government and was never published. So there we go.
Thank you for that.
The clarity of message to business. We've got all of our local teams working together now for inward investment. It's been very effective. We've had some very big investments, international ones, come to this part of the world. We've worked with a global corporate, and perhaps it's best a narrative example. I was approached by someone who'd read my manifesto, who was working for a global corporate, and said, I've got this idea for an innovator. This is to do with green technology. And I've got to persuade my international boss to do it. But my colleagues told me not to bother coming to you because anything to do with local authorities takes forever. Within 6 months, we'd had it signed off and it was operational. And this is bringing really high quality, like scientist level jobs to the area, as well as a spin-off. And that centre itself is collaborating with a load of smaller local startups around the universities and so on. So that's a really effective way you can do it. And I'm aware we're short of time. Does that answer your question, Paul?
I think enough for the certain time that we've got, Jamie, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. Just very briefly, Steve and Tim, you've both got high-profile city mayors that came before Metro Mayor. So Joe Anderson in Liverpool and Marvin Rees in Bristol, and I obviously declare my association with Marvin as a Labour colleague in the city where I represent. Just very briefly, local businesses, is there any confusion about whether they go to Joe and Marvin or Steve and Tim? How does that work? Steve, do you want to go first?
I think there's always confusion about politics. People don't understand, and you'll know this as an MP, whether they should go to an MP or a councillor, or what the different responsibilities are. Actually, I think the way we tackle that is by having politics as part of a child's education. Get it very early on so people understand the processes by which at a later date they'll probably rely on. Just on the situation in our area, we have a city mayor, we have a metro mayor, we have a Lord Mayor in Liverpool, we have 5 district mayors, but we also have parish mayors as well. So there are 11 people with the title mayor, and we expect people to understand who they should go to. But the great thing is that if it's, as we're talking about with Bays, if it's an inquiry about the economy, that goes through the growth platform anyway, so it does circumvent the confusion. And just on one last issue, Chair, Paul said about profile. I can actually do without my profile in any way being enhanced in the public mind. by constant references by the Prime Minister, and apparently the lovely Jacob Rees-Mogg has just mentioned me in the House, and again, I could do without that. Me and Jacob have got so much in common now.
Well, there you are. Thanks, Stephen. And Tim, just briefly, do people in the west of England know who you are?
They certainly know what we're doing, and yes, lots of people do. And I'm just going to pick your point up about Marvin, if I may. I hope you know, yes, we work very closely together in these pieces. I said earlier, there is no wrong door. Bristol is vital to our regional economy. People work in and out of the region. How we work together is vital. You'll know that we go on international trade missions together. We stand and present across the country about driving investment into our region. So it's absolutely vital that we all work together. Like Steve, we've got lots of other mayors as well, and that was part of my discussion very early doors pre-2017 with Greg Clark about really we're picking the wrong title for this because it does confuse people. But ultimately, yes, we all work together across councils, across businesses, across politics to make sure we're seeing our region thrive and expand, Darren.
Thank you for that. And last question for today to Judith. Judith, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. The committee's heard much about the government's levelling up policy, and the Northern Powerhouse Partnership has announced a strategy to end the North-South divide, and the LEP network has published a 5-point plan to recovery. So can I ask what you think about the relationship between government and regional metro mayors is and should be to deliver the levelling up agenda, and crucially, how and who should be held to account over its successes and its failures? And if I can start with you first, Tim.
Of course, thank you, Jim. A little crackly on my speaker, so I hope I picked that up. The role with government and metro mayors, I think you've all heard us talk about it. It is time for that relationship to step up now. We are all committed cross-party about delivering for government because we're all committed to delivering for the people in our region. So that relationship does need to continue to strengthen. It's also got to, we've touched on it time and time again, be addressed around how that relationship works, about funding and how we're able to deliver. Every one of us on this call will do that if we're able to unlock those parts. I can assure you that all of the metro mayors in the country, we work very closely together, and we come together to keep pushing very much that same message to government. We're here, we will work with you, we will deliver for our regions, but for the country. That's why we need things to be reinforced around those longer term financial settlements, so we're not constantly bidding in, making sure that we're able to be recognised as Revolution was about, which is people in our regions being able to make the right decision for the region, who are in the region, and not from Whitehall. And I can assure you, I hope that my colleagues aren't contradicting me, but I'm sure you we're all absolutely aligned to that and really closely together. Hope that helps.
Thanks. And Steve, your thoughts, please.
Judith, we don't make it easy, do we, for people?
No.
So in our area, we've got this new thing called a combined authority, but then I'm part of Transport for the North, so TFN is something that people will know. On top of that, there's the Northern Powerhouse Partnership, in which I lead for skills. On top of that, Grant Shapps has put something in called the Northern Transport Acceleration Council. Then we've got the Convention of the North, and people, you know, are very confused about this sort of the myriad of different organisations, and I don't blame them. In some cases, you're wondering what hat you wear in the same room. I do think we need to take people with us. And in regard to our specific roles as Metro mayors, we are the conduit in a lot of this. We are the conduit from central government to our local authorities on many occasions, and we are the conduit between things like Northern Powerhouse Partnership, Transport for the North, etc., with what happens in our area. And that they are two-way processes. I'd simplify things if I'm absolutely honest. You know, we had plans when I was a Labour, no, it was before I was a Labour MP, with John Prescott, who was talking about pulling together sort of assemblies. It makes more sense if it's on a larger footprint so that we genuinely can start to level up the north.
Thanks, Steve. And Jamie?
Thanks, Judith. You raise a really interesting question there. Yeah, in a democracy, I've got to say that you need a mandate. And that's one of the things that you get with a regional mayor. And it's a direct mandate, and people know. And even if they don't like it, they have the chance to vote against you. So that is one of the strengths of this model. In terms of the powers, they're not there. And I think it has to be more than funding. Mark Carney was talking to the All Parliament APPG on COP26. And he used this wonderful phrase when he was talking about businesses of the tragedy of the horizon. And that is actually what a lot of funding settlements are, is you bid in, you wait for a year, 2, 3 years sometimes to find out whether you're going to get it. Then you've got to spend it in a hurry. You can't plan on that basis. So I think that we do have this tragedy of the horizon. We need the long-term funding settlement. I think we should be able to agree what the objectives are with central government, who are, of course, the national government, but then the means of delivery has to be devolved and the methods. And that's why I think we do need regional wealth funds, land value capture, the tools to generate wealth, to be able to shape our economies as opposed to just spend on our economies. I think that's really important. And I think there's a case for wider regional areas, but I think they work better when they're almost confederal, where the people from those areas come together as opposed to being a separate body that's driven by central government departments. I'm not sure what they add on that basis. So we work terrifically well as the M9, as Tim said. The functional economic area is, in the end, the functional economic area, and we should carve nature at the joints.
Thank you. If I can ask a supplementary to that, and it is to you all, but if I can start with you, Steve, and I don't want to, well, I am singling you out, but in the last few weeks, we've seen certainly the government and its dealings with Metro mayors goes through some turbulent times, I'd say, as an MP involved with a region without a Metro mayor. So can you tell me a bit more about your dealings with government over the last few days and weeks, and do you think that the government has demonstrated enough good faith in its ability to work with local leaders, and does it crucially give you confidence in their willingness and ability to actually deliver on the levelling up agenda that we so desperately need in the north?
Well, I suppose this gets back to, it's a pity Andy's not here, just to perhaps answer that, because his experiences were very different than ours in the Liverpool City region, because basically we knew we were going into Tier 3 from day one. So our discussions were more about what we need to do to ensure that we get the wider business support package. But in regard to the way that the governments have gone about this, I coined the phrase, although I saw it was on a wall, graffitied on a wall in Manchester, but I said that the North cannot become a petri dish for central government experimentation. And sometimes we feel like that's exactly what's happening to us. And me and Andy speak nearly every single day, and his fight is certainly the same fight that we have in the Liverpool City region, and we will stand shoulder to shoulder with our brothers and sisters in Greater Manchester, because it was the right thing for them to do. We had to fight our own battle, and we had different circumstances. So we went about it much more quickly and concluded things more quickly, but it shouldn't be like that. If there is to be a genuine partnership, as the government keep on telling us there will be, between regions and central governments, you can't choose to try to pick areas off one by one and do deals with each area. There should have been a much more formulaic way in which they could come to the same conclusions. And I genuinely think it's unfortunate. But what has happened is I think it's demonstrated the importance of having that coordinated voice around a Metro mayor. And that might mean in the future that we do go from strength to strength, but I don't think it should have happened the way it did happen. And I regret the way the government treated Greater Manchester.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that, Tim or Jamie, or whether you're happy to leave it to Steve. Okay, Tim.
Sorry, Judith. I think because of time, actually, we've just ran over the allotted time, so we won't be able to take any more answers on that supplemental. So forgive me for interjecting at this stage. We'll have to bring the session to an end. I should have said at the beginning that as the chair, I like to have gender-balanced panels. Clearly, there are no female metro mayors, which is the reason why we've had a manel today. But I just wanted to put that on record. Thank you, gentlemen, for your contributions today. Thank you to my colleagues. I'm bringing the session to an end. Order, order. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Sorry about that at the end.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, full politicians is not a great
Sound. Committee Room 6, 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 sound.